Downtown Portland has been through a lot this year. A pandemic that shut down businesses, protests for more than 100 days straight, and a big political battle in City Hall. But other parts of our city want to make sure that the powers that be don't forget they're struggling too.
Another year down the road, you're going to see twice as many people living in tents.
And while we're talking about the housing crisis, let's take a look at how the city is trying to squeeze in more places to live and how that might change your neighborhood.
I think there's the idea that there's like some natural, like written on the tablets rule that like there have to be neighborhoods where only rich people can live in every community, and that's simply not the case.
Here's the story.
Okay, hi. It's Friday, man. Welcome to The Story. I'm Dan Haggerty. Remember, it's beautiful out right now, but it's going to be like pouring down rain all weekend. So when you're stuck inside, you can watch all of your favorite episodes of The Story on YouTube. All the will he, won't he moments, the oh no he didn't, and the what did he just say? You can catch it all, right? All of them are searchable. Back to our very first awkward hello, which is a perfect segue to me currently now saying hello. Let me know what's on your mind. Ask us questions. Send me an email. You can do that to thestory@kgw.com. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram as well. Search Dan Haggerty or use Twitter and the hashtag HeyDan. Let's get to it, shall we? Let's do the news here. And we're going to start with our big story. Now, if you haven't heard already, and it's okay if you haven't because it's 2020 and there's a lot to pay attention to, but KGW and the Oregonian teamed up and hosted the Portland mayoral debate last night. Incumbent Mayor Ted Wheeler and challenger Sarah Iannarone answered questions posed by our very own Laurel Porter and Oregonian City Hall reporter Everton Bailey Jr. If you missed it, no problem. That's up on YouTube right now as well. It's definitely worth taking a look. Now, one of the big topics in the debate was, no shock here, Portland's housing crisis. Both candidates went in on what they would do to help get people off the streets and what they would do to help clear tents. And they were talking particularly about the city's downtown core. And it is interesting because we've been getting so much feedback from all of you, our viewers at home, about how too much attention you think is being placed on downtown when we talk about homelessness and homeless camps, when there are other parts of the city suffering just as badly. Here's Maggie Vespa.
Driving along Southeast Powell near 50th, proof of Portland's housing crisis emerges every few blocks. But this is something neighbors say they don't see much of. Police at a camp making an arrest.
Dave Sanders, Sanders.
One officer agreed to do an interview.
We've seen just a huge explosion with bike burglaries into these secure bike storage rooms. And so we identified one guy and who's been responsible for dozens of these in the last month or two.
In other words, he says this is a chop shop. Neighbors, almost laughing, said they could have told us that. When asked how often he comes out here, Officer Sanders was blunt. Almost never. He's stationed downtown, so this is a rarity. And the camps, he says, are different here.
Downtown has a lot of other kind of structures in place to kind of maintenance stuff, like picking up the trash and stuff, so we don't see the great volumes of garbage kind of spewing everywhere as much. So I feel like downtown's a little bit more manageable.
Soon after our interview, a neighbor weighed in.
Why is there something done about the rent payment, how high rent is? When I was in high school, a 2-bedroom apartment was $250. Another year down the road, you're going to see twice as many people living in tents. I might even be in a tent before too long.
In less than 1 month, Portlanders will decide the city's next mayor.
The apparent growth of Portland's housing crisis amid the pandemic was a key topic in Thursday night's mayoral debate. KGW partnered with the Oregonian to vet the two frontrunners for the seat, incumbent Mayor Ted Wheeler and challenger Sarah Iannarone.
Mayor Wheeler, everywhere people look in the city, it seems there are tents, people living unsheltered on the streets. What promise can you make the people of Portland right now about how many people you'll get off the street, and when can you make that happen?
So I can't promise a specific number. And one of the things I want us to do, part of my critique, if you will, of the Joint Office of Homeless Services, is we don't have a plan with specific metrics. We don't know how certain investments are going to reduce the camping population that we see out on the streets. So I've called for additional shelter space. I've called for 300 beds in the near term. We've added about 170 in the last few weeks. We're looking for more. And we need to focus on connecting people with the services they need to get off and stay off the street. So that's things like mental health and substance abuse and domestic violence survivorship services.
Remember, there are roughly 2,000 people sleeping outside in Multnomah County. Here's some of what Sarah Iannarone had to say.
I have worked very closely with people experiencing homelessness, the direct service providers, policymakers, so that I understand efficient deployment of shelter capacity. I've done it in my neighborhood several times. I've fought to make sure that we're working with the neighborhoods. As a neighborhood association member, I can help us ease transition so that we can have greater capacity across the city.
You'll notice both candidates spoke about the city as a whole, but people we talked to in Southeast Portland and elsewhere worry not all neighborhoods are treated equal, especially amid ongoing protests. They feel like City Hall has frequently and publicly touted plans to revitalize downtown.
How do we help businesses and what resources do we have?
But they point out other areas are suffering too. We shot video of camps as far in as Southeast 26th and as far out as 82nd. It's clear the crisis is growing everywhere.
It's a friggin' circus.
MJ Stevens could have told you that. The only people who pay attention to her, she says, are the ones who drive by almost daily to blare air horns or throw fireworks at her car. That's been happening more recently, too.
People are under one preconceived notion about everybody out here. You know, we're all just criminals and drug addicts. The truth of the matter is that most of us don't come out here with a problem. We develop them out here.
Okay, Maggie Vespa joining us now. Now, to be clear here, the city and the county, they put efforts and resources in places outside of downtown as well.
Yeah, they definitely do. And, you know, we cover when neighborhood shelters open up and when winter shelters open up. I mean, just recently we covered that the Mount Scott Community Center is going to be a severe weather shelter this winter. And obviously we've covered it quite a bit. The former Wabato Jail, now Bybee Lakes Hope Center, that just opened up as a shelter that's obviously private, but it's still a resource sort of east of the Willamette. You know, that said, for people who live outside of downtown, a lot of them told us, yeah, the fear is anecdotal. They see downtown getting all of this attention and they're afraid that it's going to get sort of more in their minds its fair share of the resources. But even if the fear is anecdotal, it's still, as you know, Dan, just very real.
Right. I mean, we get the emails all of the time. We read them every night. So it's the reason why we did this story this evening, to make sure that those people feel their concerns are heard. Maggie, thank you.
Sure.
Now, so often the discussion about homelessness and affordable housing, they go hand in hand, and for good reason. But homes in Portland aren't just out of reach for the most vulnerable. I mean, just ask, I don't know, anybody in their 20s or 30s if they're considering buying something here. That will often get met maybe with a laugh right in your face. I mean, the prices in this city are some of the highest in the country. But recently, council approved a controversial plan to change that, and I'm betting you may have not even noticed. I'll let our viewer, Dennis Phillips, sum it up in this email. Hey, Dan, for 7 interminable months, the press and the public have been justifiably obsessed with COVID, BLM protests, wildfires, and the Trump election. And during that period, City Hall passed the most consequential and aggressive rezoning policy in the nation, the Residential Infill Project. Now, Dennis is absolutely right about everything that's been going on and how easy it is to miss a story like this, though the news has been covering this one and this conversation since it started 5 years ago. And now that it's over, it could change every neighborhood in the city, from the richest to the, just kind of rich. Have you ever shopped for homes in this city? Or, I don't know, even looked around just for the heck of it? Why don't we do that for a minute? Let's start by KGW. I'd like to walk to work. I hear Nob Hill is nice, and okay, yeah, over $1 million. That's a bit out of my range, but I want good schools. So let's check out Laurelhurst, maybe something near the park, where somehow $500,000 looks like a deal and still only gets you 1 bathroom. Why don't we head north, where I found this, we'll call it a fixer-upper,
Now, I don't know a ton about real estate, but when this house costs $450,000, you may have a problem with affordable housing. In Portland, it's hard to find anything that someone who isn't rich could ever afford, a problem that Michael Anderson has been a little obsessed with.
This is going to be, in my opinion, the single best reform to low-density zoning in American history.
He's been working for the past half-decade on a plan that will change the way our neighborhoods look in Portland by bringing back the duplex, triplex, and fourplex in almost every neighborhood next door to this house and this one.
I think there's the idea that there's like some natural, like written on the tablets rule that like there have to be neighborhoods where only rich people can live in every community, and that's simply not the case. That's only there because of laws we wrote that separate people from each other, and I think we would have healthier cities if you could have some very nice mansion for somebody who has a lot of money down the block from somebody who doesn't have a lot of money.
In 1959, Portland City Council basically got rid of the duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes, said you couldn't build them anymore, and almost everything built since had to be a single-family home. Now, this made for more desirable neighborhoods, which over time made them more and more expensive, simple supply and demand. It also prolonged the segregation of our communities and encouraged aggressive gentrification that prices people out of the neighborhoods their families helped build. The city thinks that duplexes and the like could change that.
What you'll see right now under the laws that have been in effect for 50 years is that sort of rundown house will either be remodeled and then sell for $300,000 more, or sometimes even knocked down and replaced with a giant house that sells for $500,000 more. And until we change the fact that that's literally the only thing you're legally allowed to do on a property when a structure reaches the end of its useful life, then we're never going to be able to see homes remain at the sort of middle-class price points when they're newly built.
Who are going to develop these places? Because a typical developer likes kind of the model you were describing earlier, where you buy a $200,000 property, knock it down, build a $700,000 home, and make a lot of money.
There's no question that they know how to do that. And again, I don't think that's the worst thing if it happens in limited numbers. The problem is when that's the only thing you're allowed to do. So hopefully what this will do is it will create ways for entrepreneurs to come up with new ways of doing business that take the know-how and skills of Portland and Portlanders to build homes for the middle class instead of just for rich people. That's going to require new businesses and new business models, and I'm excited to sort of watch that happen. I think that's also going to require new financing techniques, that it's going to require new financing tactics for banks and credit unions to come up with ways to help like a homeowner build a duplex as an extension of their house, things like that.
Was there some pushback that from certain people in the business community that the cart was being put before the horse, that there wasn't any plan for those types of financing plans or business strategies prior to the law going into effect?
I think more it's been cynicism and worry that it won't be developed, but I don't think anybody has said I haven't heard anybody saying because it's not going to do anything we shouldn't do it. I think much more the skepticism of the project has been, oh, this is going to transform the city immediately and suddenly every lot will be a fourplex. And that's just not the way it works.
How long does that evolution take? When will the city really start to reap the benefits, in your opinion, from this type of project?
I think this is a rare example of when the city's managed to do something that's going to have very slow but large payoff. So I really think it's going to be over the course of the next generation or two that we see the effects of this action today. I think it's been really forward-thinking of the city to go through this difficult political process to figure out the possible flaws and political tweaks that need to be made. I'm excited about the results, and I'm going to be especially excited about the results when I see my kid here getting to live in the same city as me, hopefully.
His son is about 4 years old, to give you an idea of the length of a timeline we're talking about here. I also should mention that in some cases, if maybe a nonprofit were to get involved, they can actually get approved for sixplexes if it's affordable housing. I mean, anywhere in the city, right next to a $2 million home or down the street from a place where you have to search for parking for 20 minutes. I mean, if this makes you happy that you might be able to afford some place to live in this city one day, congratulations. If it makes you mad, well, kind of too late.
A lot of people think that officers should wear body cams to help prevent misconduct or brutality. So why is a Portland City Commissioner who's pushing for major police reform actually against them? We're going to look into that when the story continues.
Welcome back. Hey, if you ever miss any episodes of The Story, we post them all on KGW's YouTube page. I mean, I know I mentioned that already, but the research says that repetition works, so. We also post a lot of clips on Instagram at The Story KGW, so hop on there and hit follow. And if you ever miss any episodes of The Story, we post them all on KGW's YouTube page. I know I mentioned that already, but research says that repetition works, so. Also, there's been a lot of talk lately over the past year or so about body cameras and why Portland police still at this point don't wear them. It's a question that we get a lot here on The Story, and it's a really long answer spanning several years and administrations. But right now, there is a pilot program that was supposed to get cameras on officers, but it was scrapped due to budget cuts from COVID. A Story viewer had a question about Joanne Hardesty, the woman who wants to be police commissioner, and her thoughts on police reform and body cameras, which can seem a little contradictory. Kristen Severance is here with the answer.
Story viewer Eleanor Hood emailed us saying, "Hey Dan, there is an ad about how Joanne Hardesty doesn't want police body cameras." She goes on to say in her email she did her own research, and it appears Hardesty is in fact against officers wearing them. So she asks us, could you find out if my information on her opposition is correct and why she feels that way? Thank you, Eleanor Hood, for your email. Some background here. Commissioner Hardesty is a longtime critic of the police department and their policies. She's calling for major reform of PPB and wants Mayor Ted Wheeler to hand over control of the police bureau to her. Wheeler has not done that. Wheeler's opponent, Sarah Iannarone, has said she will do that if elected. All right, back to the question at hand. Is Joanne Hardesty against body cameras? So for the answer, first, let's go to a 2019 press release by Commissioner Hardesty regarding Wheeler's proposed budget. In it, she called for Wheeler to, quote, defund police body cameras. And then in June of this year, Hardesty tweeted in part, "We often hear that body cameras will provide police accountability, but I disagree. I believe they are an expensive, false solution." She said many studies have shown there is no correlation between body cameras and police behavior. She also said, and that's when body cameras are turned on. She tweets, "It has taken filming the police as journalists and civilians to reveal the everyday life of interacting with the police while being Black. Even that hasn't led to substantial change in policy or behavior." And she ends the thread with, "That's why it's important to keep our eye on reinvesting in community." Okay, so based on those tweets and her press release calling the body cameras an expensive, false solution, we can verify, we can confirm that yes, Commissioner Joanne Hardesty is against police body cameras. Do you have a question you want us to answer? Let us know. Just use the hashtag #HeyDan.
All right, Kristen, thank you. We also did reach out to Hardesty's office to see if she had any additional things to say, but we haven't heard back. Now, you've probably seen a story today about House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and the 25th Amendment. Basically, she's introducing a bill that could let a commission remove the president if they find he's not capable of being in power. Now, she says it's not necessarily about President Trump and would apply to future presidents. But obviously, we know this, he was just in the hospital being treated for COVID. So there was a lot of talk about what would happen if he got too sick to govern. Now, this is kind of uncharted territory here, and I know a lot of people have questions about how this would happen, what would take place. So let's start at the beginning with how the 25th Amendment works. It was passed after JFK was assassinated to clarify in the Constitution that the vice president would in fact take over if the president died. It also laid out a plan for what to do if the president was still alive but was permanently injured or got too sick to actually perform the duties of the office. Now, there are three ways the amendment can be used to transfer power here. First, the president dies or resigns, and the vice president takes over. We saw this happen with Nixon in the form of resignation. Second, the president himself can voluntarily transfer his power to the vice president. This has actually happened 3 times. You may have heard about it. They've been talking about it in the news. They all involved colonoscopies. President Reagan had one and George W. Bush had 2, during which they temporarily gave up power to their VPs while they were under anesthesia. Now, here's the third way that this can happen. If the vice president and the president's cabinet agree that he is unfit to lead, they can remove him. The president can fight this, but then it goes to Congress and they decide. Now, this last part has never been used before to remove a president. And to be clear, Pelosi is not really trying to do that right now. What she does want to do is give Congress more power in the process. See, the amendment allows Congress to create a body. That's what Pelosi would like to do. That would then take place of the cabinet, and that body would decide with the VP instead of the cabinet if the president should be removed. So Pelosi is promising a commission chosen by the House and the Senate, leaders there to evaluate the president's health. It would be made up of 4 doctors and 4 psychiatrists and 16 former high-ranking officials, like former cabinet members. If they find the president cannot do his job and then the vice president agrees with him, that triggers the 25th Amendment process under this proposal. But again, this is just a proposal, and it is pretty unlikely to pass, at least with the way Congress is stacked up right now. Just figured we should spend a little time explaining that. Now, if you got a question that you want answered, please let me know. We like researching it and talking about stuff like that. I always check my emails and Facebook messages, so keep them coming. In the meantime, hey, how about a feel-good story? Want to do that? It's Friday. I want a feel-good story. This one is a nice one. You're going to like it. It's about a small cemetery south of Olympia that has, I don't know, what you would call its very own guardian angel. Devin Haskins introduces us to a woman who spends her time washing away years of dirt and grass from the headstones.
On this fall day, at a small cemetery tucked away in Thurston County, something wonderful is happening. It's almost as if an angel had been called. Buried beneath the blades of grass and moss-covered graves are heroes and family members, resting in eternal peace.
This guy's name is Evan David James. He was a corporal in the U.S. Marine Corps.
This angel's name is Kelly Mulvaney. She's not afraid to get dirty.
A lot of people they started calling me and Annika and the angels of the cemetery.
Annika is her 4-year-old granddaughter, an occasional helper. So what would draw someone to do something like this with no family buried here?
As I saw the military headstones covered in mold and moss and mildew, and it just, I'm like, those aren't supposed to look like that.
And like the time that creeps by after saying the last goodbyes, so does the grass, slowly swallowing up the edges of a gravestone so carefully picked out.
The people aren't forgotten.
Yeah.
But sometimes the headstones, get old and covered with dirt, and the people can't get here.
The headstones carry more than a name. They represent a person, someone loved.
What Kelly's doing is no doubt a selfless act, doing something for others that she doesn't even know. But for me, it hit very close to home.
You see, this is my family's plot. Resting here is my grandfather, great-grandparents, great-uncle, and 2 of my dad's cousins.
Hi. Hey, nice to see you.
This is my cousin, Crystal Hitchcock. She lost her mom, Vicki McKinney, when she was just 8 years old.
I am now older than my mom was. I hit that mark last October.
At just 37 years old, Vicki died when a semi-truck failed to miss the stop traffic and swerved into her lane, hitting her head on.
It's hard for me every day because I don't have my mom.
The headstones are a reminder of just how precious life is. Something Crystal doesn't take for granted, knowing in an instant it can be taken away.
Every night when I've tucked the girls into bed, I love you is the last thing that they hear from me.
It's said when you leave this world to leave it better than when you arrived.
It just makes me feel good in a lot of different ways. So I just keep doing it.
And after almost 600 headstones cleaned,
I can't believe that somebody would be kind enough to do that and just take so much time out of their day and their week and year or whatever and do that for somebody else that they don't even know.
It's the work of an angel revealing the past, making it look better for the future.
And I've got such a
Near Rochester, Washington.
response from the community. It's just kept me going.
I'm Devin Haskins, KGW News.